Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first session of the new version of the Diversity Institute. As always, I'm Alex. So for folks who are still planning on doing the passport, that's still an option. We'll have to do it electronically, of course. Previously, there was like the faculty staff track and the student track, and I got rid of that. So now people can go to whatever session they can to do that. Make note of everyone who's here, and then once this is over with, I'll keep track of that along with the sessions that have already taken place. That way people can get on that. But anyway, I can talk more about that after we're done for people who have more questions. But for today, we have Liz here with us from the Women's Center. Well, not currently in the Women's Center, but
from my son's bedroom.
So I guess without any further ado, take it away.
Thanks, Alex. Well, hi, everybody. So this, I think, is extremely pertinent and relevant to the time that we find ourselves in. I was looking at resources to support student parents, and so I was calling around to some other institutions just to give you a little background on how I kind of came upon Bridge to Benefits. And I was talking with a staff member at St. Cloud who said that they would utilize the Bridge to Benefits assessment to help students determine what federal and state resources they might qualify for. And it is such a simple assessment and such a nice way for us to gather a little bit of information about our students. And so it just seemed like a really good decision to start using it on campus. And so I did a training last August, 1.5 million years ago, and we've started using it a little bit across campus for those who participated in the training. And so we're evolving how we access this particular tool, but I appreciate all of you being here because the more contact that we have with students, particularly students who are in financial jams, the more helpful we can be. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the background, and then really what I'm going to do is walk you through the web tool. And one of the benefits of the fact that we're doing this all on Zoom is that it won't hurt my feelings if you shut me off to the side once we do get into the website, and you can start clicking through some of the things yourself. So if you have questions as we go, don't hesitate to let Alex know or put it in the comments or interject. Also, the captions I have found that PowerPoint creates are pretty good. They are not completely perfect. So bear with me if they're not great, but it's better than nothing, I find. So with that, we'll kind of click through. So this is pretty obvious. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is why Bridge to Benefits is so important. I think in an ideal world, I wish this would stop for a second. It was so cool to start. Okay. In an ideal world, we would all want to be self-actualizing, being the most that we can be. Obviously, there's a lot of layers that exist below that we need to have in order to get to that point. And so while we want all of our students to be ready to self-actualize, it's just not possible if they don't have their physiological needs met. I think we can all relate to this more so now really than before, and it's probably, if I speak for myself, I'm sitting at kind of safety needs and love and belonging are the two layers of the hierarchy where I'm at. So I'm doing the best that I can, just like most of us are and just like our students are. But through the Bridge to Benefits tool, we are able to focus on some of those physiological needs that there really some of our students are just hurting when it comes to having enough money for groceries, being able to afford their rent, all of those pieces. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. So what the tool does, so this is a brief assessment. It takes, once you've done it a few times, it really takes 5 to 10 minutes max. The tool helps to determine if a student will be eligible to apply for any of these bulleted items. And so you can see healthcare is on there, energy assistance, food items are on there, supplemental nutrition assistance, WIC, school meals, child care assistance, and then some scholarships and tax credits. And so what the tool doesn't do is right here. It doesn't apply to the program for the student. And so when folks talk with us and we go through this brief assessment with them, they are not applying. So anything they tell us, anything we fill in is all just to give them a ballpark of what might exist for them. It definitely does not guarantee that the student will get the benefit, because if off the top of my head I think I never have money, I probably make $500 a month and my rent's $300, and then I have to get my pay stub and my lease and those items, and it starts to show that I make a little more, maybe my benefit changes or I don't qualify anymore. And so we don't ask for any proof when doing this assessment. We're just having people answer to the best of their ability. So that can mean that they might not get the benefit. Also, some of the pools of money, like the reduced utility cost grant, is a finite dollar amount. It's not unlimited, and so sometimes the pool is just empty for that year. Also, the tool does not ask for personal information, and so as we talk a little further, I will talk about like our international students or undocumented students. Doing this assessment is not going to put their information in front of the state or the feds. This is just basically, we'll do some referrals at the end and you'll all get to see that. And so those are 3 things that it doesn't do. Why do we do this? So this can ease monthly expenses for students, which truly was the primary reason I was looking at it. A couple $100s in grocery money goes a long way when your income is under $1,000 a month. It improves the economic well-being for the children of our students. So we do have students with children. I think 5% of our FAFSA completing students as of last year claim dependence on their FAFSA. And so people with kids who are also going to school, who are also balancing work, if we can help ease some of their financial burden, all the better. It does bring federal dollars into Minnesota, which is good. It's good for our local economy. I don't know, using the word economy right now just feels gross. But it does get those federal dollars into the state. And then it also helps break down the stigma and lack of awareness about these programs. There can be a lot of discomfort when you think about like being on food stamps or using the WIC checks at the grocery store, and talking to students and saying, you know, these are things that exist for people who qualify and you qualify, so take the benefit, I think doesn't mean that you're, you know, draining resources away from other people. It's the money exists to help. And so if we can help students understand that it's there for them. I know my mom is a Head Start teacher, and she talked about how when we were kids, we probably would have qualified for a lot of state and federal benefits. We just didn't know. And so I think another part of it, beyond the stigma, is really just not knowing. So this is some state data from, I think, 2 years ago. And this is on the Bridge to Benefits website. I just wanted to synthesize a little bit of it here, just to show that like 88% of income eligible children are not enrolled in child care assistance, and daycare it's one of the most expensive things in my life. And so if we can help people get their hands on that. Energy assistance, 70% of eligible households aren't enrolled. When it comes to SNAP, a third of eligible Minnesotans aren't getting like hundreds of dollars a month to help with their grocery expenses. And so I think all these things are really just a good motivator to get this assessment out in front of as many students as we can. And as we go through it, consider too, it's not just for students. This is for anyone who lives here. So as people's circumstances change, it might be something that you want to explore. It might be something you want to share with a neighbor. It might be something you want to share with a sibling. This exists really for anyone. There's no limitation to who can utilize this tool. Okay, so here's some institutional data for things that we've done. 35 screens this semester. 17% of the people who participated had children. 77% qualified in something and were interested in at least one program. A lot of those programs tend to be SNAP and the utility support or the energy assistance. Also healthcare. There's a couple students who've come through that I've talked with who've been interested in healthcare. The average income, $8,500 annually. I don't know how people pay rent and eat with $8,500, and then with the median income being $6,000. And so to me, that just is another strong reason to keep getting this out in front of students. These are just some of the things they've qualified for. So 20 of those 35 qualified for energy assistance, 24 qualified for SNAP. And I think that's great. Medical assistance. I think a lot of our traditional age students are still on their parents' health insurance, but not everybody's got that relationship, or not everybody has a parent who's carrying health insurance. And so medical assistance is something that's also extremely important, particularly now. And I will make reference, there's a COVID-19 page on the Bridge to Benefits website that we'll check out. And so that's also another reason I think healthcare is going to be really important. So then I asked institutional research for a little bit of data to get an understanding of like what our student profile is. We have almost 3,800 students who are Pell eligible, almost 500 who are grad or teaching assistants, and then federal work study is almost 600. And with that being an average dollar amount of $2,200 per year. And I realize that students who have work study might also work other jobs, but $2,200 is not a lot to spread out over, 8 or 9 months. And so these are the groups of students, and as we go, we'll talk more about that. But these are the groups of students I think who could really benefit from what this program offers.
So we do have one question in the chat from Tamara,
Yeah.
just asking, she just wasn't aware of Bridge to Benefits before, so she was wondering if it is connected to SNAP in any way, or if they're separate things.
So this assessment is going to determine if someone might be eligible for SNAP, but they will still need to apply for SNAP separately. And so that is kind of the deal. We become essentially a referral agent for these programs. So if someone qualifies for SNAP, we're going to send them over to Tina England, who's the SNAP coordinator for the area, and she is going to do the intake and get all the paperwork for that to determine what they truly qualify for. So all that we're doing is coming up with a good estimation of what someone might qualify for, and then they still need to go about applying, which I think all of us can be good motivators and cheerleaders to encourage people to do that, but can be kind of like a daunting task when you have 4 things you're eligible for and then 4 separate application processes. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's a really good question. SNAP and Bridge to Benefits are not the same organization. Bridge to Benefits was created by the Children's Defense Fund to help get state and federal dollars into kids' families' hands. SNAP is one of those ways to get those dollars to those folks.
I'm going to put in the chat the link just to the About Us page from the Bridge to Benefits website in case people have to do it. Karen just commented too, SNAP has not changed due to the pandemic and people still need to work 20 hours in order to qualify.
Okay, which I think we're trying as best we can with work-study students to keep them working and to keep our student employees going with home projects. I'm not sure how well that's going. Okay, so when would we use Bridge to Benefits? When would we do the assessment? Because it's hard in casual conversation to be like, you seem broke, let's talk about that. So we certainly can wait until a student talks about their financial struggles. I can tell you that when I was sitting in my office in the Women's Center, I was like a great ear hustler. And if I would hear people talking about having financial difficulties, I would grab them into my office and say, hey, let's do this real quick and see if you might qualify for something. So that's one path. Now that path is a little bit different because they're not sitting right outside my office anymore. But I know that we each have our own ways that we're still communicating with students. So some of the strategies that I was thinking of that I certainly am going to try to find a way to basically make it a little bit more of a systematic outreach, but it's inviting all work study and Pell eligible students to participate, inviting GAs to participate, because if you make $10,000 a year, you qualify because you are under the federal poverty limit, which is like $12,000 a year for one person. Offer time during the class. So if we have any faculty or anybody who's taught like first year experience or things like that, we can offer a time during class to allow students to screen themselves. And I would be happy to facilitate that for anybody who's interested. So I guess to put a question out for a little audience participation, what are some other ways that you might see a really organic opportunity to talk about this with students?
One thing I will say, both me and Tamara teach sections of CSP 110. So like
Yeah.
you had mentioned with the first year experience courses, first year seminar, I know that previous semesters instructors have actually invited Tina to come speak to their classes specifically about SNAP.
Hmm.
But this might be a way so that we started, and then if maybe a few students tend to qualify more for SNAP in the class, then have Tina come in rather than have her come in
Right.
like an initial screening. Yeah. Karen in the chat says the free farmers market is another opportunity.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. I'd be happy to set up a table, God, when we come back. I miss you all.
Keyword when, just putting it out there.
When? Is that what I said? I meant to say when.
Yes, 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 yes. Just
Oh, good.
emphasizing that.
I was hoping I was being optimistic and not completely. Anything else? I think the emergency grant, I've talked a little bit with Carolyn about Carolyn Nelson about the next time there's a training for some of the emergency grant members. I think if people are hurting because of a significant expense that can be solved with $1,000, they may qualify.
And then a few of us who are in the participants here also are coaches for MSP students.
Great.
So that might be something to do in the first few sessions of New Year, just with all students, so we don't feel like we're targeting specific students, but just say, hey, I'm having all of the students that coach take this. Let's do this for a few minutes.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think it's like neutralizing, again, the bias or the stigma that comes along with public benefit is that we're all at a state school. So to me, we're benefiting from state programs. I don't know anybody who doesn't get any financial aid. I realize that's not a fair thing to say, but that there are all ways that we benefit from state programs. If anyone did public K-12 education, that's one thing. And so just to make this one more of those pieces that exist, just to helping people eat and heat their homes. I don't know. That shouldn't be politicized to me, but I realize that it is. Would work study students who aren't working from home but still getting paid through the university still be qualified? I think that is a question, Paku, for Tina through the SNAP program. I think because the expectation for SNAP for the nutrition assistants is that you have to be employed 20 hours a week. I also think that there's some different things that exist. It might be the unemployment. I think if they're still getting paid, wouldn't they still be considered working? The question of the matter is it 20 hours? Karen looks like she'll ask that question. Thank you, Karen, for checking up on that. But those are kind of the deeper questions. I think they're really great. Keep them coming. But I don't know the answer. And I also recognize, too, in this bizarro pandemic world that we're in, things are trying to be made easier for like WIC and SNAP applications. You don't have to go somewhere. You can do it over the phone. And so to me, I think it's worth having the students check versus trying to coach them out of it. And as we go through the assessment in a little bit, you'll see the question, do you work 20 hours, doesn't come up. It's not even on the list. And so every program that Bridge to Benefits talks about has, like a 10-mile list of qualifications to really be part of it. This is simply taking people's budget for their rent and their housing and their salary dollar amounts and assessing it from that. So as I really want to drive home the point that we are not experts or social workers, the I don't know answer comes out of my mouth a lot when I'm meeting with students for Bridge to Benefits. There's a really phenomenal frequently asked questions list. And then there's always a point referral. So whether that's for healthcare or SNAP or energy assistance, there's someone that we can say, talk to this person who will have more of the details. So this is truly positioning us as referral agents as opposed to the person who can really in-depth explain what SNAP or WIC or the energy assistance program are. So I want everybody to think about that because then it takes away some of the scariness of doing this because you're not going to do it wrong. You're going to do it with the information the students give you. And then what we do is we just follow up incessantly to make sure that they've talked to the people that we've referred them to. Just quick show of hands. How many students do we have listening in? See, there's so many tricks. I don't know how to count. Anyway, okay. So I want to, basically my goal with this presentation is to talk kind of from all points, both as the person who might utilize the tool and the person who might utilize it with someone. And so just keep that in mind as we go. So if you're a student using the tool on your own to figure out what you might qualify for, then you would use this first username and password. So this is for students using the tool to make the assessment for themselves. It's not an assessment for someone else. It's your own use. So it's kind of a one-time use thing. And so the username is, okay, so it's pretty simple. I'm going to figure out a way to advertise this to students and give some more context for why they would want to use the assessment. But jot that down if that's the way that you want to use the tool when we practice together. For faculty and staff outside of diversity and inclusion, you would use and then if you're diversity and inclusion staff, you'd use this is a change if you've gone through the training before, and maybe some of the questions popping up are related to that. This is a change because I was creating an individual username and password for everybody who was using it, and that got really cumbersome. So I think it's going to be easier. The reason that we have these username and passwords is for tracking information or tracking purposes. We can then go back and look at data by area or by whomever's talking with students, or students themselves using the tool. You can use the tool without a login, but then we don't get to capture any of that information. And so that's really what this is. So if you are part of diversity and inclusion and you've been through this training with me before, I'm going to send out an email to everybody, but you would use either the username and then the password that pertains to it. So write these down. I'll send these out to everybody who's here. We'll keep a list and then we'll send a follow-up email with kind of how to log in and access things. Oh, thanks, Alex. Perfect. So it's in the chat bar as well, now that we've moved on. Okay, so when I sit down with a student, these are my go-to disclaimers. So this is assessment only. In order to apply, you still need to provide documentation. So we're going to do things off the top of a student's head as far as their monthly salary and their monthly rent costs, but they have to supply documentation to the benefits person when they apply for it. So this is only an assessment. If they are not a U.S. citizen, they may or may not qualify for some of these benefits. I try to tell people this up front. I try to tell every person I talk to this up front. And we'll see as we go through the assessment, there is a point where it's written on the screen, and so I just read it word for word. Basically, if people have children, they have access to more resources because there is healthcare for kids under 18 and food and those types of things are in place. This is an estimate. Actual benefit amounts may vary. So I think that I had a student meet with me and at one point it looked like she might qualify for $100 in SNAP. And then when she did the application, she found out she had some other benefit coming in that we didn't capture on the assessment, and so it turned into like $30. $30 is still $30, and so she considered it time well spent, but that is something that I try to mention up front. And then I read every question on the assessment to the student, even if I think I already know the answer, because I'm finding out all sorts of things about my students that I assumed incorrectly or didn't know. And so as we look at it, you'll see, but I say read every question as if you don't know what the answer is. Okay, I did want to expand just a smidge here. So immigrants may be able to enroll in many of the programs. Many of the programs they would qualify for are for students with children, so WIC, child care assistance, school meals. There is legislation that's gone into practice from the Trump administration that considers someone who is not a citizen and uses federal benefits a public charge. And that classification of being considered a public charge can impact the ability to obtain citizenship in the future. Now, some of our students are studying and then they're going to go home. Some are not. And their pathway includes wanting to pursue citizenship. I am not a legal professional, nor do I have, I think, even a scratching of the surface level of knowledge of immigration law or even what this administration is doing to people. But there is a phone number that Bridge to Benefits lists that's for Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid, and they can call that number before they apply. Doing the assessment, as we mentioned kind of at the beginning, this is not recording their information. This isn't, so it won't be like the feds in 5 years when someone, you know, petitions for their citizenship would say, oh, well, one time you did an assessment with your, you know, the director of the women's center at your school. That's not, this information isn't recorded until they would apply for the program. I also don't believe that just applying puts students at unnecessary risk. However, I would still encourage them, once you've gone through the assessment, if they are not either a refugee or a citizen, that they should call this Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid number. People who are here for asylum or with refugee status do often qualify for all of these things and don't have the threat of public charge. It's kind of a confusing thing. So that's why my blanket statement to students who are not residents of Minnesota or U.S. citizens to say, call Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid at this number to determine if you want to apply for these programs. Reasons I think someone might apply, obviously, if they have no food, if they have kids and need health care, if their children are hungry. I think it really kind of comes down to those with children, because we can talk about food resources and other things for students who are undocumented. But just on the hazard on the side of caution, and make sure that they call that number to get some information before applying. And it kind of references that in the actual assessment tool, which we'll get to here in just a second. But I did want to hit on that with a little more detail.
Quick update. Karen got in touch with Tina about the question about work-study students who aren't working from home but still getting paid. They're technically getting paid, so Tina says she would say so, but hasn't had it come up yet. But the key is that they're still getting paid from those work-study funds.
Perfect. I think that makes sense to me, because it's not like if they show up at work or not that someone's there double checking, but I'm glad that we have a little bit of confirmation. So yes, definitely encourage working or like getting paid but not working students to still apply. Okay, so we're going to jump to the website, and I think you still all get to see this. So this will come out in the email from me as well. So you have the website and the username and password. It'll probably be a day or two, frankly, before I get it out, but you can look this up as well if you want to follow along on your own screen and play with it. By all means, do that. It is not riveting to watch someone click through a website without having your own crack at it. So this is the website. There is a ton of information all about the programs, so you can dive in as deeply or not as you want to. They've got a link to COVID resources, which I also have at the end slide of this presentation, and so you can look at that as well. So here's the Bridge to Benefits homepage. Like I said, start button here is quick and for anyone. So if I were going to tell a family member or a friend, I would say hit the green start button. For us, in order to collect that data, we want to click partner login over here on the left side. So home, start, partner login, and then I will log in. Okay, so I see a bunch of stuff you won't see because I'm like the administrator for it. And so this is how I can see, like, I talked with 3 client customers. So I've talked with 3 students. Anyway, this is just why we want people using the login, because then we can record it. And then I get these little fancy reports that show like how much money have people qualified for. So I showed you that data on the slideshow, but you can see it here. So that's why I want that. It's not a big deal if you don't. It helps the student just the same if you don't do this, but it helps us better to know maybe some more of the financial details or needs of our students. So you probably have two buttons, the screening tool and the advanced screening tool. Just real quick, the advanced screening tool synthesizes the little assessment all into one page. So you can see that it's pretty short. The pre-screen, their situation, taxes, children, income, deductions, etc. It's really short. I don't like to use this one at this point because I don't have my shtick developed just yet as far as what each of those questions is related to. And so I use the bulky screening tool, which I recommend as you're getting the hang of things. So I start on this with the student. Like I said, I ask every question of the student as we go. They all laugh when I ask if they're a senior who's 65 years or older, but then it's just important to get the answers. When you ask these questions, this relates to who's in their household. So this isn't like in my parents' house, someone in my family has a physical or developmental disability. This is who in my current residence does. If it's nobody, that's fine. But it's their residence where they're living right now, not kind of where they live in the summer or anything like that. And then everybody would do, I'm currently a student. So this talks in a little bit more detail, and I do tend to go over this material with the students to say that there's some unique rules, like for instance with SNAP, if you live away from your parents under the age of 21, then you would qualify under your own income. If you live with your parents when they're over 21, but you buy your own stuff, then you may still qualify for SNAP on your own. It's extra. You can look in the FAQ section. This is really the student's going to answer, and then we're going to refer them. And so we'll say we're a student and click next. This talks about what it does. So these are the things that I mentioned again earlier on in the slide. I do tend to highlight students most often are qualifying for health insurance, energy assistance, and then supplemental nutrition assistance, unless they have kids, and then it expands out a little bit more. And then it says what it cannot do. And then this is where I highlight the note to non-citizens right down here at the bottom. There are no questions about immigration status in this assessment at all, but we can let them know that you may be able to enroll, there may be some challenges, and so referring folks to that phone number is really, I think, important. And the learn more brings you to the frequently asked questions, and then it talks in great detail about for SNAP, you have to be a U.S. citizen or have an acceptable immigration status, which I think relates to being a refugee or asylee. Okay. So who are you helping? So if you are going to play around, which is what we're doing today, we want to say that so that we don't record any of this information in as real data. And then it'll just show 15 people played around with the screening tool. When you're working with a student, I select a client, customer, or family that I work with. So those are the two that I tend to use the most. I think if you're going to do it for yourself or your family, maybe do the other button because we don't want to record that necessarily as a need of our student unless you are a student. County that you live in, so fill this out for yourself. Usually students are telling me they live in Blue Earth or they live in Nicollet. However, people have gone home, and so we might be doing this over the phone for somebody who's in Hennepin or Carver. We don't know. So just verify what county they're living in at the moment, because that will impact who they talk to about some of those benefits. Describe your living situation. This one also important to read. Don't assume. That was my bad in assuming that I knew the marital status of a student, but it does give some qualifying language in here, which is convoluted and confusing. I just have them answer the question, like select that you're unmarried and living with the parent or what. There's details. So keep it simple and just ask them directly. If they have a more complicated situation, then kind of dive down into the italicized language. Do they plan to file taxes? This would be kind of whatever, yes or no. If they're not working, then sometimes it's no. Is somebody pregnant? This addresses healthcare and then those WIC resources. And then do you have any children ages 23 or under who live with you half of the year or more? So are they essentially the primary caregiver for any children? And then they would select that. Okay, so then it's the amount of money before taxes and deductions. I just omit taxes and deductions and I say, how much do you make an hour? Particularly for some of our undergraduate students, what do you make a paycheck? And then we multiply it by 2 and we put it for the month. Because at this point, this whole assessment is just an estimate. It's not their final application. And so if it's a little bit different here from what they actually submit when they apply, it's not going to harm them at all. It's not going to hurt their application. It might change a little, some of those dollar amounts a little bit, but rather than sit there and have them like scrolling around in their bank statements, we just kind of go off the cuff. And so we'll say $500 a month. And then their spouse, or like you and your spouse, you're adding it together. So this is unemployment, pensions, taxable interest. Very rarely are our students earning anything here, though unemployment at this point may be something that they are getting, given that there's the COVID unemployment support right now. So that would be where they'd need to put whatever per month or annually, however they know the information. For this, veterans benefits, I do think of that as something. I know that some of our students get disability payments, and so we do want to have folks list basically what federal funds, so to speak, are they already getting. And then this is, what are they contributing? Are they paying their student loan interest? Do they pay for books out of pocket for education related tuition and fees? And then I generally say, okay, how much did you spend on books this year? And then again, it's kind of a rough estimate. So if we say we spent $1,000, that's what we would list there. How many other people live with you? This gets confusing for students. This is people who share meals and expenses. So like, is this my roommate who has their own lease, or is this like I live with my sister and we buy groceries together? You know, like I realize that those can be one and the same or separate. But again, it's to the best of the student's ability. And then what's their income? Because for like the energy assistance, this might be where this comes up, or SNAP. If it's meals, they're spending groceries. Is it one person or 2 people or whatever? And then how much do they earn? This is another one where we often guess like, oh, is your roommate work at the school too? Do they make $10 an hour like you do? How often do they work? And so those are some of the leading questions that I tend to ask to help a student think a little bit about it. And then remind them at the end that you're going to need to talk to your roommate about providing some information as well for some of these resources. This is if they claim dependent. So usually it's 0 for a lot of the students we do. And then income, again, for other people in the household, and then we just put 0. So that's it. Now we're to the results section. So this shows what they're eligible for based on the information that we put in. And so if they're already receiving the program, they can say on program. If they're not interested, like an early learning scholarship is for kids under the age of kindergarten. And so if you don't have children, you would put not interested. Most students are looking for SNAP, energy assistance, and then the tax credits we bring up, but I feel like that's fairly automatic with anybody processing their taxes. However, information will populate. And then medical assistance. Some students are seeking healthcare coverage. Others are already on their guardians or parents' insurance. So if the student's not sure that they want to apply, wants more information, you can click this link. Clicking I want to apply does not do anything. It doesn't apply. So if we say I want to apply, we'll be able to get the program information in a minute. But this shows how do they want to apply. I advise one-on-one, honestly, because it's a faster way of like getting their questions answered. Other students are just going to want to do everything online that they possibly can. Some of these things you can't. Like you can't apply for a tax credit online. That's just part of doing your taxes. Energy assistance has to be in person. SNAP, I think, will result in a phone call. But we'll just say one-on-one for all of these, and then get your personalized application plan. Because I remind them, just because we're doing this doesn't mean you've applied to anything. So sending an email referral, this is really important because what this does is it triggers the referral team in our community to contact these students. And so this is where they can decide, I don't want to do any of this. Let's skip to the end of the form. I don't want anybody to know my name or my information, or I've decided I don't qualify for enough to make it worth my time. Whatever the case might be, everybody's got their own stuff. But for instance, you'd put in their name, address, phone number, and then if they want to get text messages to the number, and then their email address. And then you can share that the only place that this information goes is to the referral recipients. So Minnesota Valley Action Council will reach out about the Energy Assistance Program. Open Door Health Center will reach out for the medical assistance. Second Harvest will reach out for SNAP. And then in the notes section, what you want to say is like MNSU, and then put your name. Liz in the Women's Center. This gives folks like Tina England, who does Second Harvest, it gives her a little bit of context, like who did you talk to, who went over this with you. It's, if you forget to put that in the note section, it's not a big deal. But then when you hit send, it will go to anyone that you select for. So say they don't want medical assistance, but they do want energy and SNAP. They want a referral for those two. You just check the box and then you send it off, and then they get that information to contact the student. It does sometimes take a week or two for that contact to come back, but going to the next, so if we send it, that would go send off the referral. We're going to skip that for now. And then it brings them to the personalized application plan. So basically we've completed the whole assessment. And now what this is a very long list of detailed information about what they might qualify for. It's got links, it's got addresses, it's got the name of contact people and phone numbers. And so this is something that I definitely encourage you to forward out to the student, and it's in like great detail. And so you're probably seeing like who qualifies, what information do I have to have? You need a passport or a birth certificate, proof of ID, those types of things. Except for pregnant women, for healthcare, they don't need proof of immigration status. These are all accurate and up to date. And it's very lengthy, but I do then at the very, very, very bottom, send email, and then you can put the student's email address in and send them a copy of this so that you don't sit there and have to read through it in great detail with them. But what it does is it gives them a reference point. When Tina calls from SNAP, they can scroll down and be like, okay, this is what I need to do. I know I need to talk with somebody. I know that I'm going to need a proof of my check stub and my earned income and that I have a job, and et cetera, et cetera. But like I said, we're just making referrals. We are not the intake person. I would never, ever, ever tell a student, oh, because you may not have some of these things, you don't qualify. I think the more people we can funnel to these resources, the better, even if they may get turned away or they may get less support than the assessment initially says. Questions? Thoughts?
Karen says, good presentation. And Tamara says, love all the information.
Thanks.
No questions
Appreciate the
right now.
feedback. All right. Well, let's pop back over to maybe.
One thing that did come up earlier, I had said that there's the question about who else do you live with, at least for SNAP purposes, kind of when Tina gave her presentation last semester, was if you're basically living together, cooking together, you're both putting both of your money into buying food, then that would be considered living together. But if, for example, you just share a bottle of ketchup in the fridge,
right,
that's not considered living together.
A few things that I do just as I wrap up my conversation with a student, because this can be, they can be in and out, 10 minutes and we're done. I talk to them about other resources too, because everything that's a federal or state program requires an application and requires documentation, and that maybe I have to go home and get my birth certificate. Maybe I don't know. Everybody's got their own kind of the checklist of stuff to do. And so there's things in the immediate present that we can also make referrals to. I definitely reference the emergency grant for students who are experiencing immediate financial hardships. Related, if you're not aware of this, for students who are impacted because of significant reduction in hours to their work or unemployment because of COVID-19, they will be eligible for the emergency grant if they are a U.S. citizen or a Minnesota DREAM Act student. If they are Pell eligible or have an estimated family contribution of $8,000 or less, they have to be enrolled for the year. And so if they meet those criteria and they've they're unemployed because of COVID-19, they do have to file for unemployment first and then show that they've done that, and then they'd be eligible for up to $500 to help with like monthly expenses one time. If they have something greater than I mean, I don't know what's greater than your entire income being lost, but if they have something like dramatic, like significant car repairs, medical bills, etc., then they could still qualify for the $1,000. But it is $500, probably to stretch it a little bit further. And so that is something to be mindful of when you encourage people to apply for the emergency grant. But the frequently asked questions for Bridge to Benefits is something I'm on all the time, just to kind of help me get my head around some of the resources that exist. They have a great link now to COVID-19 resources. It talks about healthcare. It talks about the changes to SNAP, where now you don't have to meet face-to-face with someone. You can do it over the phone. WIC is the same thing. And so there have been changes to some of these programs that makes it frankly easier, I think, for people to get access to them instead of having people chase all around the county trying to talk with people. And then the non-traditional student services community resource page is so good. It is exhaustive in its community related stuff. I've asked Emmy Mank if we can use it for the diversity and inclusion webpage. I make reference to it a ton when I talk with students about anything financial, because it lists every place you can get food. It lists affordable housing stuff. It's just exhaustive. So bookmark that bad boy because it's amazing and so helpful. Also, if you are really needing to feel a little bit of humility and be humbled, I think clicking through that and recognizing that our students need these resources for that bottom layer of their hierarchy of needs just to get through, to show up to class, I think that gives me a greater sense of patience, maybe, and empathy. So I know all of you who are here and showed up to this conversation have a good understanding of that, but it's definitely humbling. So I also echo Food Shelf. Just the quick piece on that is that students can get like 12 visits a year, 1 visit per week. And it's not far from campus. It's just down the hill. Campus Cupboard is open. And obviously Karen's our expert on kind of connections there, but Campus Cupboard is open on Tuesdays, I think from 11 to 1 during these COVID times, and things are pre-bagged. And so folks can also access some groceries there as well. And that's Campus Cupboard is located in the Crossroads Church, which is right behind the Performing Arts Building. And so if students are out and about, they can pop in there and get groceries on Tuesdays.
So we have a couple questions in the chat. One from Antonia, just asking if this is for students. Is there a reason why our Student Health Services medical clinic isn't listed as a resource?
It's 100% a resource. This was what I came up with my baby on my lap earlier. So it is absolutely not exhaustive. I would like to list all sorts of things as resources, and I'll be sure that that goes out in the final list. But yes, Student Health Services is absolutely a resource, and I make a bunch of referrals over there for students.
And then another one from Megan. I know that you said that you will sit down and go through the assessment with students, but to my knowledge, that's not something my office would generally do. When we connect students to resources, we generally provide contact information and a brief explanation of the resources and how they might be helpful for students. Does your office or someone else on campus have or know how to get handout materials that we might be able to pass along to students?
Absolutely. My goal, it's just been in the last week that I got the login information for students to do the assessment on their own. And so now that we have that username and password, I do want to make a handout with a little bit of information about each of the benefits within it. I don't have that on handy yet. Megan, can you remind me what office you work for? Thank you. Yes, we will absolutely. We'll have a brochure. So Title IX, we will definitely have a brochure, a physical one when we're physically back on campus. But I will try to come up with like a PDF or something that can be emailed out, or that could be posted to people's websites or Facebook pages or things like that. So yes, definitely. I think when we're able to, if the opportunity presents itself to do this with the student, it goes a lot faster than when you're trying to explain it to people. But if you're able to go through it, I think that's great, because then you can kind of explain like, look, $100 is going to be a lot of money, or, even if it's $50, that's good, or, whatever the case might be. But absolutely, refer students. And if it's helpful too, if they want to do it with someone, you can also send them my way. You can have them send me an email. You can have me email them. I have been talking with students while we've been kind of remotely connecting to do some of these bridge to benefits assessments.
Karen does say that campus cupboard is Tuesdays from 11 to 1, but as of last week, you could go in and get their own stuff. The campus kitchen is closed now, so we don't have the campus kitchen, like the little fridge or the bread cart going.
Alrighty. Thanks, Karen. Yes, and so campus cupboard or the campus kitchen, usually was where people could grab a meal each day, but I think that's just been it's too risky, and so it's easier to do the prep and cleaning for the campus cupboard. But that is it's so great that students are able to get resources. Also, if you're thinking about who to make a donation to, I think Campus Cupboard is always taking donations. I know Echo Food Shelf, all of those places, because, those of us who are showing up on this webinar are fortunate enough to be able to work and keep our salaries, whereas others are not in the same position. So a few emails will go out when this wraps with a little bit more detail. I'll list the login page. I'm probably going to email you a couple of times in the next week or two. I do want to make like a pretty handout for students so that it's a little more glamorous than just a Word document. You're going to get a Word document. Don't hesitate to share the website username and password for the student page now for folks who want to do it, and then we can always follow up again with outreach. If you want to shoot me a quick email with the name of a student that you met with, which is up to you, I don't want to break anybody's confidentiality. Obviously, if they're meeting with you, you can ask them if they're comfortable having their name shared, because I can always do some follow-up to see, did you hear from somebody? Do you need help getting in contact with someone? How can we be of service? This is an abnormal time. I think our students are going to have use for this much more than they even would have a month ago. So the more the merrier, that we can connect people with resources, because I don't know how long we'll be in the circumstance of being kind of socially isolated or physically isolated, but I do know that the financial implications may be longer lasting even than our little lockdown time is. And so please keep this in mind and share. And if you have colleagues who want more information, I think like Alex has recorded this, I can also do a 30-minute version one-on-one. So don't hesitate to let people know that I'm available to explain this process. Thanks everybody for your super supportive feedback. I know we do the best we can. It's really hard not having your faces to react from, but it does make the presentation go smoother, not break up people's internet when we have just the still photos. So thank you everyone. Alex, you want to plug the next one?
Yes. So since we don't have to turn on our mics and clap, there is a clap reaction down at the bottom for everyone.
That's okay.
Thank you, Liz, for presenting. After this, I'll take the recording, kind of edit out a couple of the hiccupy parts of when we were getting started and whatnot, so it looks really polished and professional.
Thank you.
And that way we can have it up on the website. We can put it on Facebook, share it out, or if people just want quick information, you can do that too. Any final thoughts, questions, etc.? Otherwise, you can email me, you can email Liz. I've also got the contact information for Tina if you have questions specifically for her as well.
Thanks, everybody.